With Franco and Brad's romance blossoming, and the mysterious new Sims moving in, Forever Valley will change. Brad is enjoying his daughter's last moments as a toddler, as her birthday is coming up soon. His little girl is already showing signs of being a genius, so the man is eager to see what interesting things will come out of that little mind. Speaking of successful growth, with the new bookstore in town, Brad can now purchase new compositions that will help him improve his guitar skill. It's also a new place to play for tips. For Willa's birthday, Brad only invited Franco and his parents, who are the only people he truly relates to in this town. Unfortunately, Dave couldn't attend because his health isn't what it used to be. Chara says it's something they have to accept, since they're both nearing the end of their lives. Brad understands that his daughter is eager to grow up, but he doesn't think that's the right way. The man also wants to point out that he managed to steal the cutest sim in the valley. He's grateful that both Franco and Chara didn't make a big deal about his daughter blowing out the candles. He's happy to have people like that in his life, who understand that sometimes the simple things are the best. It seems his daughter isn't just showing signs of being a genius, she's also a computer whiz, despite never having had any contact with anything technological. Brad doesn't know how he feels about that. He no longer believes technology is all that great, just necessary. He'll have to see what the future holds. In the meantime, he'll continue raising Willa the same way he always has. Even if that means not letting her eat the cake he bought her. Maybe he'll have to learn to make cakes himself for future birthdays. Although from the look in her eyes, it seemed that the girl was thinking about more important things than a simple cake. As a birthday present, Brad bought her a telescope to help develop the intelligence so apparent in Willa. He also wants to encourage her to do physical activity, not just exercise her mind. It's also a great way to spend time together. Willa doesn't want to tell her father that she was glad when the rain interrupted their ball game, not because she didn't want to spend time with him but because she was very eager to try out her new telescope. Brad continues to play in Stony Falls, even though tourists pay less than locals do when he plays in stores. But the place is beautiful and he enjoys the view. At her father's urging, Willa went to visit the other boy her age, Adrien Rousseau, but he wasn't home, so she contented herself with telling ghost stories to his family. Her imagination is very big, so that makes up for not having friends, like when she plays tea party with her teddy bear. Brad thought it was time to learn another instrument, and since he was already used to strings, he decided on the bass. Meanwhile, Willa enjoys her father's music while discovering stars in the sky. Willa has a very enjoyable and activity-filled childhood, perhaps because she, like all the children in the village, is homeschooled, and this gives her more time to enjoy other things. When they're not together, Brad spends hours on the phone talking to Franco. He likes the easy relationship he has with the young man, where neither feels pressured to be more than they are. After several days, Brad was able to meet his new neighbors, Miriam Portillo and Semra Barons. His impression of them was that they seemed somewhat different, as if their heads weren't in the moment. Although they weren't the only ones who seemed to have their minds a little scattered. For some reason, Dave Nothing was searching through the trash. But Brad isn't one to judge. Now that Willa is more independent, Brad can spend a few hours practicing different compositions to improve his guitar playing, and thus earn higher tips. But it's not all work. Sometimes he just enjoyed watching his daughter's genius mind work. Although, to be honest, he doesn't consider playing guitar in front of an audience a job, but rather a pleasure, even if it's how he makes a living. The philosophy of enjoying the little things seems to have been inherited by Willa, who, despite her brilliant mind, is still a girl who enjoys silly things. One day, Willa found a stray cat in her yard and wanted to befriend it, but after playing with it for a few hours, it suddenly left. The girl hopes to see it again since she would like to have a pet. The next visitor that day was Adrien Rousseau, who was apparently being encouraged by his mother to make friends. The two children bonded over well-intentioned but overly present parents. When did life go by so fast? Brad wondered as he stared at the cake that would transform him from a young adult into a full-fledged adult. At least from the way Franco looks at him out of the corner of his eye, he knows he's still hot. The kiss also proves it. Although the best proof that he is still attractive is the fact that Franco decided to spend the night at his house. Unfortunately, he had to leave for a few hours to fulfill an opportunity the new neighbors had given him. Franco offered to stay and look after Willa. Since the girl knew her father's boyfriend was a writer, she asked him if he could read her one of his books as a bedtime story. The young man tried to remember if he had one suitable for Willa's age. Surely, a preteen like her would be interested in a light romance, right? At least it was enough to put the girl to sleep. Franco had to admit he really liked that moment. Upon his return, Brad was touched by the situation. His two favorite people had formed a bond. When the man suggested he stay one more night, Franco declined. What had happened with Willa had made him think about things he didn't know he wanted. However, the young man didn't know he wasn't the only one considering something similar. What will happen to them from now on now that their relationship seems to have changed? If you ask Miriam, she knows that neither she nor Semra are what people call normal. The way they met isn't normal and neither is their relationship. Well, if she can call what they have now a relationship. They met in an institution which for some reason other Sims didn't want to call what it was. A psychiatric hospital. She has no problem calling it by its name. She's insane as her trait indicates, and Semra has more memory problems than a sloth. Proof of this is that he doesn't remember meeting her there. He also doesn't remember their romantic relationship. Of the two of them, she is the more mentally healthy, if she can say so. If anyone thinks she's heartbroken over this, think again. This is a challenge for her and she loves challenges. That's why when she found out he had been appointed as a police officer in Forever Valley, she began to pretend to lead a life of crime, despite having no idea how to do it. The truth is, she knew in advance which days he would be patrolling the town, so Miriam would show up to pretend she was stealing. That's why she always made a lot of noise when she broke into a house, so the owners could quickly call Semra. And what makes more noise than a toilet being lifted out of the floor? Nothing, absolutely nothing. In those moments, Semra appeared like the knight in white armor he'd always wanted to be, rescuing some unfortunate Sim, and for a moment, there was a kind of recognition in his eyes. Miriam felt a thrill of excitement knowing that little by little she was breaking through his mental barriers. What if she let him win every single one of their fights? Well, that's her way of flirting. After all, using handcuffs can be very sexy. Unfortunately, someone in the institution realized two things. One, that she was pretending to be a thief. And two, that some idiot in the police force thought Semra Barons, with the worst memory anyone had ever had, might make a good cop. And so they both find themselves living in Forever Valley, since the institution thought both she and Semra should contribute to the town they had so harassed. And she's the crazy one? But at least this gives her a good chance to win back her boyfriend, who for the moment believes they're two enemies on opposite sides of the law. Semra's memory loss was always very funny. And like she said, she loves a challenge. For this new era, the people at the institution asked them what they wanted to do with their lives. Miriam thought creating elixirs would be good. Perhaps she could find a magic cure for their ailments, something that science had never made possible. Semra, for his part, said he wanted to be an inventor, but she believes it was just a whim of the moment, since he had never touched the invention bench since they arrived. Just in case, Miriam advised him to also apply for a job at the town bookstore, since if there's one thing Semra's memory is good at, it's remembering books. At least that would help with the money. Miriam started an herb garden that will be used for her elixirs. Although she plans to eventually visit the founder's home and ask them to let her harvest some of their plants, they surely have ones that could be useful to her. Semra woke up from bed just as Miriam was finishing all the chores. So she approached him with her new plan of conquest, to confuse him until he couldn't remember anything again and his mind was a blank canvas. She introduced herself as if she didn't know him, and asked him how he had spent his first night in the town, even though they had moved a few days before. After that, she started talking about topics like rain and the weather, A typical awkward conversation that people who don't know each other yet tend to have. By the end of that conversation, he no longer disliked her and they were back to square one. Now she'd have to wait a few days to continue with the second step of the plan. Seduce him until he forgot his own name. Which, being Semra, was a sure thing even without seduction. But first, a little pillow fight for some fun. And to remind herself that even though Semra never remembers anything about their past together, he always ends up falling in love with her. Or as she likes to think, his heart always remembers her. That day was so full of activity and emotional stress that Miriam ended up going to bed early. The man, for some reason, preferred to learn how to make elixirs despite having the invention bench in front of him. He'd probably already forgotten he wanted to be an inventor. As Miriam had explained earlier, the man went to take a position at the bookstore. He then spent hours talking with Franco, unaware that he was the same Sim who had hired him. Franco now doubts whether it was a good idea to offer him the position. For now, he is not going to judge him. Semra stayed there until late at night. He may have forgotten how to get home. Miriam is searching through the trash, perhaps finding ingredients for her elixirs. Doctors used to say it was due to her insane trait, but she disagrees. No one ever understands how many important things can be in trash cans. Like the moth she needed for one of her elixirs. She was invited to a party one of her neighbors was having. It was a swimsuit party in a house without a pool and in one of those cold spring days. And she was the insane one? The party was a total bore, so she decided to leave before it was over. It was so boring that some of the guests were yawning. Near the party house there were small space rocks and Miriam picked them up. Maybe they'd be useful. Instead of going to the party, Semra chose to stay all afternoon and into the evening, sending insulting messages to his neighbors. He was sure they were hiding something from him, even though he'd never met them before. When Miriam collected those space stones, this was not what she thought they would be used for. Now she didn't know whether to tell what had happened to her. They never believed her when she said these things. Like when she adopted a dragon in Dragon Valley, everyone said it was a lie because she was crazy. It would be better if she kept it quiet. Step 2 of winning Semra back was more successful than she expected. Maybe it's because she was wearing her swimsuit, but to be fair, he was showing off his abs. He had no problem when she offered to be in a stable relationship. As he said, they were already living together and sharing a bed, although not in the way she wanted. Then, they were sharing a bed in the way she really wanted. Is pregnancy too soon for this relationship? Maybe for him, but she's known him since she was a teenager. While she was cooking, the stove caught fire. Why? She's not the absent-minded one between them. Now she'll have to deduct 5 points from her tally of good and bad things. Yes, she gives points to the events in her life. Who cares? To forget about life's bad times, Miriam went to the Nothings to ask them to let her harvest from their garden. They were very kind and agreed, or perhaps they'd heard that the new couple wasn't very stable and didn't want to alienate them. What does it matter what the reason was? He got what she wanted. Having a boyfriend with the absent-minded trait means that all the housework falls on her. Not because he doesn't want to help, but because he forgets what he's doing all the time. At least he cooks occasionally and he seems to be able to finish that without any problems. Miriam invented an elixir that keeps her in Semra's good mood. And Semra has no problem being her guinea pig and accepts her throwing those strange little bottles at him. She went into labor while carving a pumpkin. Nothing unusual about that, right? Little Juan was born with the easily impressed and absent-minded traits. Miriam didn't know that Semra's memory loss was hereditary. Was her insanity hereditary as well? For now, Semra hasn't forgotten that she's his girlfriend and that the little baby is his son. Miriam realized that now that they're parents, she'd have to find techniques to help Semra remember the most important things. She also realized she had to take advantage of the moments when her boyfriend's memory was good, to move forward in their relationship. She proposed to him and he happily accepted. They married immediately afterward. Miriam couldn't afford to plan a full wedding. Not only did they lack the money, but Semra might forget to attend. Perhaps some people would say that what she's doing with her now husband isn't moral. But she knows Semra well and she knows what he wants, even if he sometimes doesn't remember it himself. What did you think of today's episode? In case it wasn't clear, the new family is doing the "I'm surrounded by idiots" challenge. What did you think of the Portillos? And what do you think Brad and Franco need to think about? Let me know in the comments. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. See you in the next episode. Until next time. Bye.